Suspect as 15 years old, and because of his age, they did not release his name. All 6 suspects face reckless murder charges in relation to the shooting, which killed 4 individuals and wounded 32 others. Police have still not provided a possible motive for the suspects, and they haven't released other details, such as the weapons used or a timeline of the incident. Funeral services for victims began this weekend with the service honoring Corbin DeMontre Holston, who graduated from Dadeville High School in 2018. For NPR News, I'm Kyle Gassett in Troy, Alabama.
The U.S. is setting a record pace for mass killings this year, according to a database Northeastern University maintains in partnership with the Associated Press and USA Today. The database has recorded 88 lives lost in 17 mass incidents that involve various weapons. It states that each time, the killer has wielded firearms. The group acknowledges that when it comes to gun violence, its database is narrower than other tracking sites such as the Gun Violence Archive, which has recorded 167 mass shootings, each involving 4 or more victims. And the archive has counted nearly 13,000 deaths as a result of intentional or unintentional gun violence. Russia says one of its own fighter jets was responsible for a large bomb explosion in a Russian city bordering Ukraine. According to local officials, the incident led to 3 people being injured. Here's NPR's Charles Maines.
According to Russia's defense ministry, an Su-34 Air Force plane was flying over the Russian border city of Belgorod on a mission when it had a, quote, accidental discharge of its payload. The Russian bomb landed in a central city street, creating a massive crater some 65 feet wide and damaging nearby cars and apartment buildings. Belgorod and other border regions have faced occasional shelling from spillover fighting amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, yet Russian planes have also caused damage. In October of last year, another Su-34 jet crashed into an apartment building in the southern Russian border town of Yeysk, killing more than a dozen people in their homes. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
While in Germany to attend the Ukraine contact group meeting with key international allies, U.S. officials have announced more tanks for Ukrainian forces that'll arrive in Germany next month. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, reiterates the U.S.'s continued commitment to this fight.
The United States and the members of this contact group remain committed to supporting Ukraine as it fights for freedom against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion.
Roughly 250 Ukrainian troops are expected to begin a 10-week program to train on the U.S.-provided tanks. This is NPR News.
54 degrees in River North at 12:04. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Labas with WBEZ News. A new study from DePaul University makes the case for why Chicago needs to keep its Greyhound bus station. Like most bus depots across the country, the one on Chicago's near west side is owned by a private real estate company. It has hired a broker to market what has become a very valuable piece of land. DePaul University's Joe Schwieterman says doing that would be devastating. Demolishing the Greyhound bus station, would be devastating to low-income travelers who have limited options. A 14-year-old boy was killed in a shooting Thursday afternoon in the South Chicago neighborhood. Police say the teen was inside a car in the 2300 block of East 80th Street at the time. The Sun-Times reporting nobody in custody. The University of Illinois at Chicago is offering free oral cancer screenings on the south and west sides of the city. WBEZ's Nareda Moreno checked in with a dentist.
Residents have 3 more chances to get a free oral cancer screening this month. The next event is today at UI Health from 1 to 4 p.m. Doctors will perform neck and oral exams to look for signs of lumps, bumps, or anything unusual. Dr. Nick Callahan is a surgeon at UI Health. He says most cases are related to the human papillomavirus rather than smoking and drinking.
Cancers in the mouth in kids are extremely rare, but we have seen a pretty significant decrease in the average age of the cancer patient, particularly female patients, can be as early as their 20s and 40s.
Callahan said families should visit their dentist about twice a year. Nereida Moreno, WBEZ News.
This is WBEZ.
Support for NPR comes from Angie. Angie's List is now Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners get home projects done well, from everyday repairs to dream remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. This is NPR.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. What a year this week has been. Even though the news has piled on, we somehow made it to Friday. Now, the busy week was filled with stories like these.
Chicago police announcing new security measures after a weekend of teen takeovers.
More and more video has been coming out showing fist fights, kids running in front of traffic, damage to property, even gunfire that left 3 boys wounded.
After 4 years presiding over Chicago City Council, Mayor Lightfoot led her final council meeting, conducting business as normal without any fanfare.
This meeting is adjourned.
As 12 council members say farewell to their council seats.
It's time for our weekly news recap, and here to dive deep into the top local stories is Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of CityCast Chicago, a daily podcast and newsletter. Welcome back, Carrie.
Thanks, Sasha. Glad to be here.
Also here, Monica Ng, Chicago reporter for AXIOS. Hey, Monica.
Hey, Sasha.
And we've got WBEZ criminal justice reporter Patrick Smith back here on the recap. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Sasha.
Remember that you can now watch the weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages. Hello, everyone. All right, let's dive right in, Patrick. City leaders and residents, they're still searching for answers to the cause, as well as police response to the downtown violence that we saw last weekend in the Loop, also on the South Side. So where are we in terms of arrests and just information about how these events occurred?
So I got to be honest, there's not like a ton new that we know now compared to what we knew maybe Monday morning or Tuesday. 15 arrests were made throughout the night on Saturday during that sort of downtown mayhem that you heard the clip about just a second ago. Also downtown, there were 2 teenagers who were shot. So that was Saturday night. 2 teenagers were shot. Mm-hmm. The night before at 31st Street Beach, a 14-year-old boy was shot and wounded. And that was during another mass teen gathering at 31st Street Beach. What we know is that none of the arrests, I said there were 15 people arrested, none of them were for the shootings. There haven't been arrests made for those shootings. There haven't been arrests made for, I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard about the incident that was caught on video where the couple was robbed and beaten by a group of people, group of young people, seemingly based on the video. No arrests have been made in that incident as well. So what we know right now is mostly what we knew on Monday, which is that things got out of hand and police were really not able, police and whoever else you want to hold responsible for it, were not able to sort of keep things in control.
Do we have any sense, like from social media, of what helped teens organize the gatherings?
Well, I mean, it seems like what happened Saturday night downtown is something that's been happening for years. I mean, I think Adriana here at WBEZ did a story back in 2019 about they're called teen trends. I'm going to sound like such an old person as I talk about this, but
teen trends.
I know the name alone makes it sound like it's set up for me to sound stupid. Exactly. Basically flyers that go out on social media saying, hey, we're all meeting up here. And I think it's pretty natural as I looked around the table, like young people want to be where young people are. And the idea of like, all the cool kids are going down to downtown or other young people are going to be at the lakefront, that draws young people together. And that's actually something that I've heard from people as I've been reporting on the aftermath of what happened downtown and at the beach, which is this has been happening over and over again, and the city should not have been caught flat-footed. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they should have been ready to knock heads and lock people up, but they should have been prepared in some way that this beautiful Saturday was happening. Things were going around on social media. There were probably going to be lots of kids around.
Well, Monica, there's a nonprofit that thinks they have a solution. They're hoping to help by creating a text and email system. It's supposed to alert parents about large teen gatherings as they happen. Any details? I mean, how is that supposed to work?
Well, supposedly, parents, it takes a village. So a bunch of parents in a village can start ratting out their kids and saying, hey, Johnny's going to a party. I heard it's going to happen at the Brickyard Mall, and then share that with other parents. And hopefully, it's sort of like that 11 o'clock thing that used to appear on the TV. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? And so they can, at least get hip to the latest parties. And yet that story in 2019 by Adriana was terrific. And I had read it, but I'd forgotten about it. And so when Lori Lightfoot put out her statement this weekend saying, we need to deal with these teen trends issues, I thought it was a typo. I thought she means the teen issues or the teen trends. But I think the more that adults can understand this phenomenon, the more we can, say, okay, yeah, no, it's fine for kids to get together, but not fine for them to hurt people. And that video that was seen, millions of times, that's something we got on at AXIOS on Monday and started asking the police about. At first they had, they said, well, we have a similar incident on Michigan Avenue, so we're not sure if it's the same one. It's the Wabash. Then they changed that. Yes, it's the one on Wabash, but we can't confirm that video is of that couple. a lot of people saw that video as a video of just a woman. And then, I asked them, I said, I want to see the whole police report because the witness, Miss Dennis, said that she tried to flag down cops.
Yeah.
She tried to flag down a squad car.
But no one would stop.
Rode right around her. So Tuesday night, we got confirmation that I said to Don Terry, the spokesperson, are you guys investigating this claim? And they said that they were going to investigate that. And I think that sort of brought up this larger story. She also claims, we have no evidence of this, that when she went to report this, she was told, in essence, this is what happens when you elect Brandon Johnson. That spells a very ominous. It sets a very ominous tone for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
If indeed that is what she heard.
Right. The quote was, she said that they went down to the police station and the desk sergeant, or according to her. And you're right. We don't have any evidence that this happened. I'm not sure if it was caught on body camera. That has not come out yet. But we don't have any reason to doubt her as a good Samaritan who just jumped in to help somebody in this case.
Well, Carrie, here's another thought just on those text alerts that parents are now going to be sending. Can you imagine people misusing the technology and maybe sending out alerts when teens, maybe they're just gathering without any ill intentions?
I'm sure, yeah.
I mean, teens aren't always getting together to do bad things.
Exactly, and that's the thing. And like to Patrick's point, in Chicago and a lot of cities, when it gets hot out there, And so the idea that the police would be flat-footed seems to raise the question of what's going on. Is there a power vacuum, or because we're in between superintendents sort of, and we're in between administrations? But yeah, I'm sure it could be misused. I don't want to try and get into the psychology of a teenager. I'm pretty far from being a teenager, and I know you live with teenagers.
Well, I have them, and I can tell you. Sometimes they get together for good, I promise.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, kids, teenagers, young people, it's their city too. They deserve, and that's the parks are for all of us.
They should be able to hang out.
Able to hang out, and especially outside when it's finally beautiful out, and we've been cooped up for 3 years, and there should be some sort of balance.
Started earlier this year for the first time, and are getting out much earlier. They're getting out in the first week of June. My kids are going to be looking for things to do immediately. Let's check in on our friends online. Mike Rooney on YouTube says, hopefully we find opportunities for kids, whether it's free museum access, free sports activities, and job opportunities for those who want them. And Mike continues to say, let's find something fun for them to do after school in the neighborhoods and downtown. Patrick, back to what we were discussing a moment ago, folks wondering where the cops were during this violence. Is the police department looking into that?
Well, as you just heard from Monica, the police department is specifically looking into this claim that police did not help, elected to actually try to avoid a situation where you had a beating and a robbery. Obviously, I mean, people have seen the video. It's a very fraught situation that, according to this, Good Samaritan, the police just did not do their job and scooted around it. I mean, the downtown alderman, Brian Hopkins, has been very critical of the police department, saying essentially what we were just talking about, which is like, how could you not have anticipated that this might happen? Not critical. He was not critical of the officers actually on the ground, but was critical of CPD leadership, NCTA leadership, saying that they needed to be better coordinated, that it doesn't make sense that CPD did not have a plan to try to keep things in order so that the officers who actually on the ground were not overwhelmed. I mean, there were reports of officers who tried to go into the melee being, having things thrown at them or being pushed or punched. So you could understand if there's not enough officers and you're saying, hey, you got to break up this crowd, it's not difficult for them to get overwhelmed. So that does come down to planning and having a strategy of how to handle it.
A couple questions for the roundtable here. First, I want to get your thoughts on this. Yesterday, we learned Interim Police Superintendent Eric Carter is going to be stepping down on May 15th. That's the same day that Brandon Johnson is going to be sworn in as our next mayor. How do you think last weekend's violence might have contributed to that decision to step down?
I'm not sure. Alderman Hopkins, he said that it was Carter and the head of the CTA who got in a screaming match on Saturday night about whether or not they should shut down CTA service. Obviously, when aldermen are saying, and it wasn't just Hopkins, when aldermen are saying the CPD was not prepared, that falls at the feet of Interim Superintendent Eric Carter. I'm not sure what to make of the fact that he's announcing his retirement. He's been with CPD for 30 years. He's announcing it, and it's going to be effective the day that Brandon Johnson takes office. I'm being honest. I don't know if that's a sort of a screw you to Mayor-elect Johnson or not, or it seems weird for it to be a coincidence, but I can't say I know their relationship well enough to know if those two are connected.
I mean, it also seems to be a sort of a white flag saying, this is a really, really tough job.
Yeah.
Where I'm trying to deal with this violence. I may, if those officers, if that sergeant's words reflected, or if John Catanzara, the FOP leader's words reflect rank and file, I'm dealing with a demoralized rank and file. I'm dealing with a new mayor who many of the rank and file feel like is not their advocate. Why would anyone want the job?
Yeah. Mayor Lightfoot called on parents to take responsibility for their children, while Mayor-elect Johnson, we heard him urge folks to not, quote, demonize youth who have otherwise been starved of opportunities in their communities. What do you think about how these two quite different responses come across, Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, Johnson is in, obviously, the spotlight's on him a little bit more than Lightfoot. She's lame duck. She's been pretty quiet in the press as she sort of takes her final weeks in her administration. Johnson's response is not surprising based on how he's campaigned and how he's, talks about being an educator. So I think also it goes back to what, someone said online of, museums and all this. Kids also need to feel welcome at those places, right? Teenagers need to feel, we hear stories all the time of young people who go in shopping or go here and they're immediately they're immediately scrutinized, and they're not going to you're not going to go somewhere where you don't feel welcome. None of us would do that. I think that Johnson is immediately in a tough spot, as he knew he would be. And like Monica's saying, just like the superintendent, being the mayor is a tough job.
Downstate lawmakers weighed in on the weekend violence. Here's what Central Illinois State Senator Chapin Rose had to say.
Refusing to condemn in the strongest terms possible what happened, terrorizing tourists is not an economic development strategy for the city of Chicago.
You think the state senator from Champaign, do you think he echoes what a lot of people feel about the situation, Monica?
Well, if you look online, a lot of people do feel that. But I mean, I think this is classic Brendan Johnson, if we can say classic to a guy who's not even been inaugurated yet, which is his campaign seems to be, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not binary. It's not either or. It's not saying all these kids are devils or all these kids are angels. It's we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
We can condemn in the strongest terms what happened, but also say, a lot of these kids are good kids who, got caught up in something, and it doesn't help to demonize them. Let's figure out how we can get to the root causes of these problems, just like you talked about with crime, that we can do both at the same time.
Patrick, let's get back to what our viewer on YouTube, Mike, had to say there. There have been a lot of calls for investment in youth employment and programming. Just talk to us about some of the ideas that are floating around.
Yeah, so there's this idea. I mean, Brandon Johnson has said he's going to double the amount of youth employment here in the city of Chicago. Not in response to this. That was one of his platforms as he was running. We've heard from youth advocates who say, if you added thousands of more jobs, you'd give kids more things to do, and also more to lose. I mean, if you've got a job and you're liking it and you're making money, you're also going to try to avoid doing things that would, maybe get you fired from that job. You're not going to have, maybe not have the pent-up energy that we saw on display somewhat downtown. I've also heard from youth advocates to another point that you were talking about, the viewer, which is giving kids something to do. What I heard was two things. One, there is a lot of programming, maybe not enough, but there's a lot of programming for young people, but there's not a lot of it on the weekends. That Saturdays and Sunday night, not Sunday nights, but Saturday nights, Friday nights, there's not a lot of youth programming there.
Yeah.
So we should probably step that up in the neighborhoods, and then also accept that kids are going to go downtown because it's beautiful, because it's fun to go there, because it's a place to mingle with people who aren't in your immediate neighborhood. And so if they're going to be down there, and I say if they're going to be down there anyway as if that's a bad thing, but if they're going to be down there, give them things to do downtown as well. I mean, I heard people say, let young people organize safe events that they would know young people actually want to go to, in ways that would sort of put that energy into something less chaotic.
Yeah. And pushing back a little on that state rep from Champaign, I mean, it's not just tourists who traverse through downtown, right? The Loop is a lot of people. There are a lot of jobs in the Loop. There are a lot of people who work in the buildings and work at the museums and work as parking attendants. And there are also a lot of hardworking Chicago families that want to, on a Saturday, take their family to Navy Pier or Millennium Park. So it's not just that, we need to protect the tourists. I think Brandon Johnson also understands Chicagoans are there too.
You know, if you read social media, everyone's left downtown.
Right.
Last night, late-ish at night, I was at the Studio 54 pop-up downtown in my fancy clothes.
Monica truly goes harder than
and
you.
then
really I was in dreamland.
I am walking around looking at all these people around me enjoying Chicago. I mean, it's not deserted. There were young people saying, "Let's go party, let's go dance, a little disco dance," and it's let's boogie, as the children say. And so people are still out enjoying Chicago.
Totally. Well, thank you for making it in today, Monica, because I know it must have been a rough morning.
After a little Pedialyte, I'm okay.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Monica Ng of AXIOS and the Chicago nightclubs, WBEZ Patrick Smith, and Carrie Shepherd of CityCast Chicago. A reminder, you can watch the weekly news recap live on WBEZ's Facebook and YouTube pages. You can also leave us a comment or question. Talk to us in that YouTube chat box, and I'll read what you have to say on the air. Like Michael Marsh's comment saying, Brandon Johnson did not express sympathy for the victims of the violence. Very bad. All right, we're going to switch gears and talk about City Council because it was quite the love fest at City Hall this week. It was marking the end of an era for Mayor Lightfoot and at least a dozen City Council members saying goodbye. Were you surprised, Carrie, by that warm reception and the tributes that were given to Alderman Ed Burke?
No, I mean, that's part of the pomp and circumstance of this period, for sure. I would say, I think it was probably wise for Alderman Burke, who has been indicted on corruption charges, to tell the Alderman Ray Lopez to take back the idea of naming May 15th, also the inauguration of our new mayor, Ed Burke Day. I think that Ed Burke was wise to say, maybe we shouldn't do that.
That was an interesting...
Burke has a huge legacy, of course. He's the historian of the council. He, as Heather Sharon said on CityCast this morning, he was inaugurated into City Council before the moon landing. So, there's some deep roots there. But let's not forget also that Burke was part of the council wars that blocked Mayor Harold Washington's basically his whole first term legislation and policies. So he's resigning also. He's retiring because he's been indicted. So
yeah, let's hear a bit from him. This is how Alderman Burke bid farewell to his council colleagues.
In politics, there are no permanent enemies, no permanent friends, only permanent interests. If I have failed during these past 54 years in achieving that goal, please permit me to apologize.
Do you feel like almost everyone's forgotten that he's facing federal corruption charges?
Oh, I don't think so. And I'm pretty sure Greg Pratt and all of our other great City Council reporters will keep reminding us.
When does he actually go on trial?
I don't know.
I believe is it November 6th, I think?
It's this year?
Yeah. It's he's facing 14 counts of racketeering, bribery, and extortion.
Mm-hmm. I did learn that I didn't know this, that he led the ban on indoor smoking in Chicago, so we can thank him for that.
Thank you, Burke.
Yeah.
How do you think Alderman Burke's going to be remembered, as a statesman or a corrupt politician?
I guess a lot depends on the outcome of his trial.
Right.
But I mean, it's a mix. I think the pomp and circumstance was there because longest serving, correct? And he had some nice swag. If you'd meet him, like I remember I was at my friend's house and I'm like, where did you get that fancy salt shaker? And it had the city flag on it. It's like, Burke, he's got the best swag.
Who knew?
Yeah, he always had like this swag to hand out.
I thought you were going to mention the pinstripe suits.
Oh, the pinstripe suits. Also, an author of conventions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, but the corruption hangs heavy. And the trial hangs heavy over him. There's a cloud, but for the last council meeting, they decided to.
Yeah, I don't mean to be rude to Alderman Burke. I think in a couple of years, no one's going to remember anything but the corruption. It'll be like, yeah, that guy served a long time. He was corrupt, and I'm not saying that's accurate. I'm not saying he was corrupt throughout his whole time. I think that these things tend to override our feelings of people. Like nobody's remembering the good things about Nixon, right?
Or Mike Madigan,
or Mike
right?
Madigan,
Right, that's true.
Or Rod Blagojevich.
Well, before we take a pause, Alderman Burke took his time to say goodbye to his colleagues in City Council, but that wasn't the case for Mayor Lightfoot. What did she do at her final City Council session, Carrie?
I think she didn't. I think she just sort of graciously accepted the accolades and then didn't speak after.
But she did leave a nice parting gift, though, in terms of the budget, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you say that only $85 million,
Right.
as
You're
a deficit,
welcome.
Yeah. But it's a much smaller deficit than anybody imagined. About $390 million better.
And that her predecessors left her smaller than that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like a record low. It's so funny. Like, only $85 million is a record low. But go ahead.
No, go ahead.
But people say, wait a minute, let's just see what happens after we do the city audit. Will it still be that low? And stimulus money and a lot of money from taxes and she has that escalator tax that's going to tie property taxes to inflation. Will Brandon Johnson hold on to that, or will he keep his promise to not raise property taxes? So who knows what it'll actually be?
I also thought it was interesting. It was John Byrne, the Tribune reporter, who pointed out, one, this sort of budget forecast that came out a couple months earlier than it normally does, which means Lightfoot kind of took away the thing we always see with a new mayor where they say, oh boy, my predecessor sure left me a mess.
Yep, right.
Lightfoot said, no, you're not going to be able to do that to me. I'm coming in early to say now that.
It's a little early to know what the outlook. Yeah,
that's true.
And to your point, she said, Johnson's going to need to keep my you
Good
tie
record,
it to
yeah.
inflation thing.
It's escalator tax.
But
yeah.
they paused that in the election year. So Lightfoot's saying you need to do this, although no, of course now I didn't do it this last year, but you need to. So.
Speaking of pauses, we're going to take one right now. We'll pick up the weekly news recap in just a moment with Monica Ng of AXIOS, WBEZ's Patrick Smith, and Carrie Shepherd with CityCast Chicago. But first, the Supreme Court's facing a deadline to decide about access to a medication used in abortions. Here's Lisa.
We're expecting to hear something before midnight tonight. The High Court weighing arguments allowing restrictions contained in lower court rulings to take effect that would severely disrupt the availability of mifepristone. That drug is used in the most common abortion, and it is the most common abortion method in the U.S. It has repeatedly been found to be safe and effective. It's been used by more than 5 million women in the U.S. since the FDA approved it in 2000. So when you woke up today, did you feel like you were missing something? Maybe your Twitter blue check mark? Well, the platform this week started stripping blue verification check marks from accounts that don't pay a monthly fee. High-profile users who lost their check marks today include Beyonce, Pope Francis, Oprah, former President Trump, but it also included major accounts for transit systems from San Francisco to Paris, national parks, including Yosemite, and official weather trackers. Food prices have risen dramatically across Europe in recent months. Hungary has seen the biggest spike. This is hitting consumers hard and forcing them to change what kind of food they buy and how much they can afford. Food prices in Hungary have surged more than 45% over the year. An economist says the country's extreme inflation can be traced to inefficiencies in farming and food processing and a historic devaluation of the currency. You're listening to WBEZ.
It's Coachella season, and of course, Bad Bunny is headlining. He just dropped a single with the band Grupo Frontera, who are known for Mexican regional music, a genre with roots that go back 150 years. And now it's topping music charts.
We're talking about all of the world. This is really a watershed moment for the genre.
Hear that on All Things Considered from NPR News.
That's today at 3 o'clock on 91.5 WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by Loyola University Chicago School of Environmental Sustainability, empowering the next generation of environmental leaders to solve today's pressing climate challenges. Learn more at luc.edu/environment. Also by the Safer Foundation, hosting its 50th anniversary Met Gala Jubilee, April 29th, with thought leaders who champion support services for justice-involved people. Tickets are at saferfoundation.org/gala. Partly sunny, breezy, mild today, 53, going up to 63, a low of 41 tonight, and then pretty chilly for the weekend, 48 on Saturday, 47 on Sunday, and you might see a little frost overnight each day. 12:30, WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and you are tuned in to the weekly news recap where we take you behind the headlines of the week's top local stories. Now, before the break, we talked about the teen violence that erupted last weekend in the Loop and the bittersweet farewell to Mayor Lightfoot at City Hall. But there's a lot more to discuss.
Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson addressing lawmakers in a rare joint session of the legislature, but also speaking out on camera for the first time about the chaos and violence last weekend in Chicago.
Demonizing children is wrong. We have to keep them safe as well.
We are now getting close to the end of the trial. The jury was dismissed until Monday morning when closing arguments are expected to begin. And it will now be up to them to decide whether the government has adequately made its corruption and bribery case against the so-called ComEd 4.
Our panel today, Monica Ng, Chicago reporter for AXIOS, WBEZ criminal justice reporter Patrick Smith, and Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of the daily podcast and newsletter CityCast Chicago. So the case against the former ComEd lobbyists and executives that'll soon be in the hands of the jury, Monica. What did we learn this week from testimonies?
Well, we heard a lot of testimony. In fact, the jury's heard 50 witnesses over 5 weeks. And Primajori, the former CEO of ComEd, took the stand. And, you know, the ComEd 4, they are former ComEd lobbyists John Hooker, Ann Primajori, the confidant Mike McLean, and City Club leader G. Doherty. They all seem to have sort of the same theme, which is we were doing stuff that is just part of politics. That seems to be the main theme.
Yeah.
This is how it works, and none of it was, in their eyes, illegal. And so, you know, I guess as the jury, you know, who's expected to start deliberation next week goes through it, I guess that's what they have to decide. Is this business as usual to give jobs, do nothing jobs to people for favors, or is it actually illegal? And I think that's the big thing here.
Carrie, anything standing out to you so far with this trial?
Yeah, I mean, to Monica's point, right? Tale as old as time. This is how you get stuff done. Dave McKinney, WBEZ, you know, longtime State House reporter Dave McKinney, we had this great discussion with him on CityCast about, like, it's not just getting jobs for people. Let's not forget how this affects you as the ComEd customer, that a lot of this lobbying meant that your bill went up. Because they you know, enacted this legislation that created the smart grid that, you know, like, you know, it can get a little weedy. But basically at the end of the line, like if you, the average Chicagoan's like, why should I care about this? Well, you have a ComEd bill that you got to pay. Yeah. And this actually did affect you. So that's
it's due tomorrow.
Right. And like, that's important. And, you know, when your utility bills go up, that's, you know, that affect, and we're with inflation. I mean, that can hit your pocket.
Yeah, for sure. I want to turn to another federal court case in Chicago, Patrick. A ruling on a lawsuit challenging Illinois' assault weapons ban. What are the details? I feel like I haven't heard about this in a minute.
Yes, so Robert Bevis, he's a firearms store owner based in Naperville. He has challenged the Illinois' recent ban on assault weapons. His lawsuit, he lost at the district court level. A federal judge ruled against him, said that the ban was constitutionally sound. That was a little ways back. He's appealing that ruling, and he asked the appeals court in Chicago to put a stay on the law. Essentially, let us sell assault weapons while I'm appealing this. He lost that bid. On Tuesday, the appeals court here in Chicago said, no, we're not going to put an injunction on this. You know, the appeal is going forward, but in the meantime, the ban holds.
Remind our listeners about the ban.
Yeah, so this was a ban. It banned military-style weapons and high-capacity magazines. It was a bill that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed at the beginning of the year in January. He signed it. It was 6 months after the shooting in Highland Park, where a gunman used an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle to kill 7 people and wound more than 40 others at the Highland Park 4th of July parade. Unfortunately, one of just many mass shootings. We see high-capacity magazines used here in shootings here in Chicago, and they are banned under this new law. But as we're talking about now, there are actually several court challenges to that ban.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. If you're just tuning in, we're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Monica Ng of AXIOS, WBEZ's Patrick Smith, and Carrie Shepherd of CityCast Chicago. We're also on YouTube and Facebook, so if you prefer to watch, remember that you can do so right now. You can leave us a comment or question in that chat box, talk to us, and we may just read what you have to say on the air. All right, let's switch gears. Mayor-elect Brandon Johnson traveled to Springfield. This was his first address to the Illinois legislature. Now, one of the things he called for was an overhaul of how the state funds schools. Let's listen to that.
A revised school funding formula will not only help every community across the state, but it will also help ensure there is a nurse and a social worker in every single school in Chicago.
So Johnson's not the first mayor that we've seen ask the state to revise how they're spending money on schools. So what is the likelihood, Monica, that we're actually going to see any changes?
Well, that I'd say that remains to be seen. But I mean, that we do have a long way to go. I mean, I think there was a recent report that we reported on, and you guys did, about how that Illinois is at the bottom when it comes to state funding of schools. A lot of it ends up on our property taxes. The state dropped its funding for, it was for higher education, but I think maybe education across the board by 50% over the last 20 years. I mean, there's a lot needs to be done. They'd like the funding formula to not be per pupil anymore. We are losing enrollment at CPS. But at the same time, he asked for a change in the local government distributive fund, which I'm sure everybody thinks about all the time.
Yes, of course.
That takes, they used to take 10% of state income taxes for infrastructure that municipalities could use. Now it's down to 6%. He'd like to boost that back up to 10%. But, I think that was one of his promises as a former educator, is one of his promises to get better funding from the state for our schools.
I want to talk about how Johnson was received by legislators in Springfield. Though he urged collaboration, here's a little bit of what Southern Illinois Republican State Representative Blaine Willauer had to say about his speech.
It was pure political theater, fantasy land, dangerously naive, a complete disassociation from the reality that we live here in the state of Illinois and they live in the city of Chicago.
Well, Carrie, do you think he sounds ready to collaborate with our new mayor?
Yes. No, I mean, I'm kind of giggling because of course it's political theater. I mean, Brandon Johnson's not a state legislator. I mean, this is always political theater. It's symbolic to say, especially considering that, it's been well reported that Mayor Lori Lightfoot did not have a great relationship with some legislators, and text revealed maybe not even with Governor Pritzker. So it's really a symbolic gesture to say, hey, I want to work with you all. And Monica made this point earlier about the zero-sum game that, he's saying just because Chicago gets something, it doesn't mean you all lose. It's a reality. There are things Chicago's going to get. We are the largest city. We are the huge economic engine. That's just we have the fourth largest public school district in the country.
Right.
But, to whoever that legislator was who said that, that's kind of sort of what he has to say also.
That's his own political theater.
Yeah, exactly. They sort of have to.
Also, that's not who Johnson's relying. It's not like Johnson's going to have to win over downstate Republicans to get his agenda through. He needs to, probably the sort of fringe people he needs to win over are like suburban Democrats, I'd assume, and downstate Democrats. I don't think Johnson's plan is relying on Southern Illinois Republicans. If it is, then that is probably doomed to fail. I doubt it is, though.
That said, he said he wanted to reset the Chicago downstate dynamic that we saw play out so much in the governor's race, that it's like us against them, red against blue, and it really echoed what he said in Chicago. I think we can address needs at the police department while also addressing the root causes of crime. I mean, he brought this down to a state message saying we don't have to be Chicago against downstate. We can all win.
Johnson was also busy this week. He was lining up more members of his leadership staff, Monica. So he announced a couple more important hires.
That's right. He announced, I want to say this right, he announced a City Hall veteran one of Mayor Richard M. Daley's administrative guys. And I will say his name, Richard Guidis. I was saying in my mind Guidice, but that's wrong.
No.
Guidis, who, and I think in some ways, because he's such a veteran, he's going to calm a lot of fears in the business community, that he's going to bring in, Marxist socialism. They're saying, look, this is a guy you know. This is a guy, Mr. Guidis is a guy you know, and he's going to bring stability. So, and he's worked at City Hall for a long time. He worked for Richie Daley, for God's sake. So right now,
that's deep roots.
I know, right? And he was leading the OEMC, the Office of Emergency Management and Communication. But in order to, I don't want to say placate or to reassure his progressive base, he's also got Senator Cristina Pacioni-Zayas, who will be the deputy
state senator. Yeah.
I remember when I think it was Tony Arnold a long time ago here. BEZ did a story about state senators, state lawmakers giving up that job to be alderman, that they'd rather be an alderman. The idea that you would leave a state senator position to be the deputy chief of staff is surprising.
I don't think she is leaving.
Oh, she's not leaving.
No, because this is a longstanding thing that legislators, they have other, just like aldermen, you can have more than, there's a lot that still keep their law practices. And they said
I was with you, Patrick. I thought she was leaving too.
Yeah, that's good to know, Carrie.
I think that she said that they said as of now she's not going to. But
Interesting. Patrick, let's talk about another big hiring decision facing Johnson. That's Chicago's next police superintendent. So with Eric Carter leaving, as we talked about, now it's unclear who's going to take over as the interim police chief before the permanent one is appointed. Is that going to put more pressure on Johnson to pick someone fast?
I don't think it will, because I think this process is going to take as long as it takes. I mean, it's written into the ordinance how it works. The police. Sorry, it used to be the police board, and now I'm blanking on the new commission. The
CCPSA.
Yes, the new Community Policing Commission. They will pick 3 finalists who Johnson then picks from. I don't think you're going to be able to speed that process up. What I do think it opens up the door for, and I'm not saying I know that this is going to happen, is bringing in an interim who can start making the changes that Johnson wants to see in the department. An example of that is when Mayor Lightfoot took over, fired Eddie Johnson, and then put in Charlie Beck, the former police chief in Los Angeles, who completely reorganized the police department, even though he was only interim. Now, weirdly enough, David Brown came in and undid all of that. It was kind of a weird. But anyway, the point is that with Carter stepping down, this is the chance for Johnson to put in an interim person who maybe could make some changes quick before you get that permanent person within a few months.
That superintendent search is still underway, of course, as we know. The second of 4 public forums that are happening in the community, that happened this week. How did that go?
Yeah, so a crowd packed into St. Sabina Catholic Church in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood. The commissioners there, they were hearing from people about they want multiple calls for somebody who came from within CPD, which is something we've heard from a lot of people, including Brandon Johnson says he wants someone from within CPD. Community members who said they want a new superintendent who will instill a culture of respect for residents.
They want systemic changes.
Yes.
Checking in on our friends on YouTube before we take a pause here. Shamrock Bloom, earlier to our assault weapons conversation, says every day in this country people are using these weapons. Thank goodness they are currently banned in Illinois. And Shamrock Bloom says, in regards to Richard Guidis, please, not someone who's endorsed by John Catanzara. He's divisive and provocative for no good reason.
Is Guidis endorsed by John Catanzara?
How do you
I didn't know you could endorse
an
a chief of
OEMC
staff.
guy?
Not sure. Shamrock, comment to me. Write something. Let me know. Give me some clarification on what you meant there. We'll take a pause in the meantime. WBEZ's Patrick Smith, also Monica Ng of AXIOS, and Carrie Shepherd of CityCast Chicago. We'll be right back with more of the weekly news recap. But first, let's check in with Lisa.
Thanks, Sasha. So a UN group today saying last year's weather was really bad. The Climate Committee issuing a report today saying killer floods, droughts, heat waves hit around the world, costing many billions of dollars. Global ocean heat and acidity levels hit record highs. Antarctic sea ice and European Alps glaciers reached record low amounts. The past 8 years have been the hottest 8 years on record around the world. A businessman pleads guilty to bribing the head of a Michigan marijuana licensing board. This is the first conviction in a federal investigation into payoffs and other benefits. John Delaley says he provided at least $68,000 in cash and other benefits to then marijuana board chair Rick Johnson. Johnson is expected to plead guilty next week along with 2 other men. Prosecutors in New Mexico will dismiss an involuntary manslaughter charge against actor Alec Baldwin in the fatal 2021 shooting of a cinematographer on the set of the Western film Rust. It was the only charge he faced. A status conference today in State District Court will consider next steps in that case. It is 12:45, and you're listening to WBEZ.
Coming up on the next Science Friday, a crash course in how anesthesia works.
Under anesthesia, you don't form memories in the same way. You don't remember things in that same way.
We'll talk about why and how anesthesiologists create a cocktail of drugs tailored to put each patient under. That's on Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
That's this afternoon at 1 o'clock on WBEZ Chicago.
WBEZ is supported by the Old Town School of Folk Music, a nonprofit music school offering group classes in guitar, banjo, wiggleworms, and more. Details on the new in-person sessions beginning April 24th are at oldtownschool.org. Also by the Environmental Law and Policy Center, celebrating Earth Week and 30 years of working to protect the Great Lakes and Midwest's environment from climate change to clean air, water, and energy, elpc.org. And support is provided by Dark Matter Coffee, proudly sourcing coffee and cocoa from Central and South America, a culinary family dedicated to producing brews and bars for everyone. DarkMatterCoffee.com. Get freshly roasted. And WBEZ is supported by Indeed and Indeed.com/credit. 53 degrees, going up to a sunny, breezy 63, and then much chillier for the weekend ahead. 1246 WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We are back with more of our weekly news recap, giving you a closer look at the week's top stories across Chicago and Illinois. Before the break, we went behind the headlines of the ComEd bribery trial, but we still have more to get to. Our panelists today, WBEZ's criminal justice reporter Patrick Smith, Carrie Shepherd, lead producer of the daily podcast and newsletter CityCast Chicago, and Monica Eng of AXIOS. All right, let's get back into it, Monica. Classes resumed at both Chicago State and Governors State universities. This is after faculty and staff returned to work this week. So what kind of resolution did they reach?
Well, Governor State and Chicago State and Eastern all have tentative agreements after work stoppages. And, supposedly they've addressed workload, they've addressed parental leave, they've addressed hours. And, as I mentioned before, that study that recently came out showed that Illinois had dropped 50% of its funding for state public universities over the last 20 years. And that is really starting to show its face. Earlier this year, UIC also went on strike. I mean, how many times have we seen this many public university strikes of institutions that serve a lot of students of color, a lot of adult students, a lot of people who are part-time students. And I think that speaks loud and clear.
Shifting gears, yesterday was 420, Carrie. It's an informal holiday for cannabis consumers.
Thank you for explaining that.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Someone wasn't aware. More than
Some people are not aware, like me. Kidding.
All right. More than 100 weed workers honored it by walking off the job. So can you just give us the details there?
Sure. It looks like these are at the dispensary Rise, which don't know if this is true, but I know they have multiple locations. And this was I think these were Rise dispensaries in the suburbs. Basically, common story with strikes, not much different than the higher ed one. Unfair. They're saying there's been unfair labor practices, basically working overtime, not being compensated appropriately. So they walked off the job, which could really hurt their bosses because it was 420 and people like to extra celebrate, I think, on 420. So, and I think they're trying to they're still bargaining, for a contract.
Still negotiating. All right, we are going to take a look at a couple cases involving police abuse now, Patrick. First, the Chicago Police Board suspended an officer for 6 months without pay. What's that about?
Yeah, so it was on yesterday, So Thursday, the Chicago Police Board voted to suspend Officer Chavez Seiler for 6 months related to a violent arrest in Humboldt Park that happened 6 years ago. Superintendent David Brown had recommended that the officer be fired for that. It happened inside of a convenience store in Humboldt Park. The officer pistol whipped the person that they were attempting to arrest. Brown had recommended that this officer be fired. The police board, however, found that much of the violence that this officer used was necessary or appropriate because the person was resisting arrest. They found that there was one point during the arrest where the person's arms got caught in their jacket and they couldn't fight back anymore, and so the officer didn't need to, but they kept hitting the person. So that's why the 6 months suspension instead of termination. It's interesting that the former superintendent thought he should be fired. I do also want to just point out quickly, as I mentioned, this was 6 years ago, and this is something that I think is just worth mentioning because it's something that upsets police officers. It's something that upsets people who want more police accountability, the public, how long these cases take to adjudicate. Because whether the officer is guilty or innocent of the charges, you would want that to be settled right away, not 6 years later.
And he stays on the job, yes, during that time, or no? Is he put on leave? Okay.
Yes, but they're like taken off of police duty. So what you've got is you've got an officer that you're paying, but they can't do most of the functions of their job.
Right.
In another case, the Cook County Sheriff's Office wants to fire a Cook County jail officer. What's that?
Yeah, so this is Reginald Robertson, a jail guard. He's actually been criminally charged with beating an inmate who requested a medical evaluation. Video from the jail shows the guard put a pair of handcuffs around his knuckles before beating the inmate. So he's been charged criminally, and Sheriff Dart is seeking to fire him.
Wow. Well, this is a good time to read Mike Rooney's comment on YouTube. Mike says, "We need a progressive chief of police who understands how to engage all communities, can address root causes of crime, and understands that the new stop and frisk of pulling over cars won't work." Carrie, let's switch gears. An Evanston Elementary School went into brief lockdown Tuesday. What happened?
Yeah, I was thinking about this story when we were talking about the assault weapons ban. This was the 8-year-old, I guess, brought a magazine into school, and I think that the student maybe informed a teacher or someone, but didn't have a gun, and they went into lockdown as they should. But it just made me think so much, like Patrick, you referenced the Highland Park shooting, and it made me think so much about the parents' responsibility. In that case, the alleged shooter's father was also, if I recall, indicted by a grand jury.
He sponsored him for a FOID card.
Because he sponsored him to get the gun. And there has to be, I remember going back years in Illinois, even, gun rights advocates would really push for this like lockup law, like you've got to lock up your firearms. Now, how do you totally enforce that? Are you going through people's homes and saying, "Hey, is your gun locked up?" But how an 8-year-old gets their hands on that, I think, is a big question, right? Just as much as like buying your teenager a gun.
When I was training to be a hunter for a story at the Tribune, we were told have a separate safe where you lock your guns and a separate safe where you lock your ammunition at all times. Doesn't seem like people are following those rules.
Right.
Patrick, our WBEZ colleague, Dan Mihalopoulos, he had a story this week. It was involving some Chicago Park District employees. Give us an overview of that.
Yeah, so this was based on an Inspector General investigation that found several Park District employees had fraudulently applied for PPP loans. The PPP loans were the payment protection loans. They were supposed to help keep companies going, keep people employed during the COVID-19 shutdown. The IG found, I believe it's, I think 6 employees have resigned. 5 more are facing discipline because they filed for PPP loans for bogus companies. The Inspector General told Mihalopoulos that they're continuing to investigate other city agencies.
Because of Dan, really, this reporting, we talk so much about what's going to happen with the next administration at CPD, CPS, CTA, but like the parks, wow, the Park District has, they have a budget that's like more than $100 million. And, Dan's reporting over the years has just really uncovered a lot of
holes.
So I'm interested. And let's remember, the Park District, their programming is all throughout the city, and a lot of people use it and should be using it.
Yeah. Of course, we can't end this recap without reflecting on the weather whiplash this week, folks. Do you remember this? This was days ago.
Record highs.
Saturday in the 80s. Monday morning we wake up, it's snowing. Yesterday there's a tornado watch. I mean, is this, am I talking to three Chicagoans here? Is this weather roller coaster? Is this part of the excitement that you love about Chicago? Or could you do without it? Could you do without it like me?
But we've always had strange weather. But when you talk to
especially.
climatologists and we say, okay, what do we expect? Is it global warming or cooling? They said extreme events. That's what we should be expecting, extremes. And that's the same with the rise and fall of Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
This is too extreme for me.
I liked the roller coaster when I was at the beach on Saturday. I hated the roller coaster on Monday when it was
snowing.
So no, I'm with Carrie. No, I don't like it. The Chicago's worth it for the weather.
Totally.
But it still sucks.
All right. Spring might arrive a little later than we wanted to, but it does always finally get here. And for some, spring officially starts when those cherry blossoms bloom over in Jackson Park. So good news. The Chicago Park District says it's now officially on cherry blossom watch, although, peak season, we still got a few more weeks there. Anybody got a favorite local spot to go and check out?
Well, Jackson Park is my jam. I love it.
Garden
and I've been
of the
checking. And, I was just in Champaign-Urbana last week speaking at the journalism school, and I love their Japan house and their cherry blossoms. They got zapped with warm weather. The cherry blossoms got tricked and then zapped. And so you go there, you see nothing. And largely that happened in D.C. Jackson Park might be the one cherry blossom spot that actually makes it this year.
Wow. Well, before we go, I'm wondering what stories really stuck out to you this week. Real quick, anything that surprised you or that you thought were underreported, or if you just want to plug something that you got coming up next week.
Well,
Monica?
I loved going to the Adler Planetarium's Dark Side of the Moon show. It's going to be there for all year. It's marking Pink Floyd's 50th anniversary of that classic album. And when I put a thing, I was like, it's $20 for tickets, bongs not included. So I was going to go, and my friend was going to get high legally beforehand, and we ran late, so we didn't get the edibles. But we both felt like we were high watching this unbelievable 43-minute show in the dome that's all above you.
Cool.
These incredible trippy images and music. And I would totally recommend people
What a
go.
week you've had, Monica.
I know, like disco dancing.
Every week is like this for Monica.
Okay, real quick, Carrie. Anything coming up on CityCast we should know about?
I saw during the spring session in Springfield, there's been this bill that's working its way through about teaching Native American history in schools, and that the curriculum should be actually informed by Native people. So I am interested in that and made some calls yesterday to learn more about that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we'll tune in and check it out. And Pat?
Oh, I feel like I'm a bummer after Monica's fun. But Shannon Heffernan, my colleague on the criminal justice desk, reported this week about a monitor's report in Illinois prisons that found almost half of all medical positions in the prisons are unfilled. You had her.
Yeah, we had Shannon on too. Yeah.
Wow.
I just think that it's an outrage.
Yeah. Well, WBEZ criminal justice reporter Patrick Smith was here. Carrie Shepherd, lead producer for CityCast Chicago, a daily podcast and newsletter, was with us. And Monica, Chicago reporter for Axios. Monica Eng, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Stephanie Kim, Linnea Dominic, Brenda Ruiz, Micah Yason, Claire Hyman, Michael Liptrot, Andrea Guthman, and Andrew Merriweather. Dan Tucker is our executive producer. Ethan Schwab, Haley Bloomquist, and Dave Miska were our engineers this week. Monday on the show, from the Green Bay Trail to the Illinois Prairie Path to the 606. The Chicago area's got a lot of beautiful trails to cycle on that were once train lines or canal paths, and more are in the works. So we're going to learn about existing and emerging rails to trails in the region and how you can enjoy them. Now, if you've got a trail that you like to cycle on in our area, this is where you come in right now. Leave us a voicemail at 888-915-9945. That is 888-915-9945. We'd love to hear your stories and play them as part of the conversation on Monday. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend. Stay warm, cold. I don't know what it's going to be. Happy early Earth Day. All the good things. I'll see you again soon.
It is 12:58. Science Friday is coming up next. You're listening to 91.5 WBEZ. I'm Lisa Labus. Good afternoon. WBEZ is supported by Northwestern Engineering's Master of Product Design and Development Management, where students